March 1811. Masked men torched factories across England, and historians have been lying about why for 2 centuries. The factories burned that night weren't random targets. They were the workshops of manufacturers who'd figured out how to cheat their workers legally. See, in the textile trade, there was an unwritten code. Skilled craftsmen controlled quality, set wages through guild tradition, and maintained what amounted to a monopoly on their own labor. It was their protection against exploitation. Then came the machinery, and with it a marketing campaign. Factory owners didn't just introduce mechanical looms, they sold the public a narrative. Progress, they called it, efficiency, lower prices for everyone. But here's what they weren't saying. They were replacing trained workers with unskilled labor paid a fraction of the rate. Same output, same quality, infinitely more profit. The workers saw the con immediately. They weren't opposed to machines, that's the lie we've swallowed. They opposed wage theft dressed up as innovation. But when they petitioned for regulation, when they asked Parliament to enforce the old apprenticeship laws that protected their trade, they were ignored. The factory owners had money. The workers had only one weapon left. Enter the Luddites. The name itself is contested, possibly from Ned Ludd, a folk hero, possibly from General Ludd, a fictional leader they invented. But what matters is the organization. These weren't angry mobs. They were disciplined, coordinated, and deliberate. They called themselves soldiers. They had captains, regiments, secret oaths. They were running a campaign. And here's where the deception question gets interesting. The Luddites didn't just break machines. They sent threatening letters to factory owners. They held mock trials in villages. They circulated propaganda claiming their movement was sanctioned by the crown. It wasn't. They created an illusion of invincibility, of an army so vast and powerful that resistance was futile. But was it deception, or was it strategy? The factory owners had lied about progress. The government had lied about the market. The newspapers had lied about who the Luddites were. The workers were fighting a propaganda war they couldn't win with truth alone, so they fought with theater. The peak came in 1812. Attacks rippled across Lancashire, Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire. Factories burned, machines were smashed. In some regions, the Luddites controlled entire villages. Manufacturers were terrified. The government sent more troops to suppress the Luddites than they had fighting Napoleon. Thousands of soldiers, cavalry, informants everywhere. Here's where it gets dark. The government didn't crush the Luddites through superior force, they used spies. Informants infiltrated the movement and identified leaders. Trials were rigged. Witnesses were paid to lie, and I mean that literally. The Home Office had a budget for confidential expenses. Perjury became state policy. The Luddites lost not because their cause was wrong, but because the system itself was corrupt. By 1816, the movement was broken. Leaders were executed. Hundreds were transported to Australia. The machinery won. And this is crucial, it won because the narrative changed. Factory owners rebranded themselves as victims. The Luddites became irrational machine haters. History was written by the winners, and it stuck. So were the Luddites fighting progress? No, they were fighting fraud. Were they using deception? Yes, but so was everyone else. The difference is their deception was in service of a legitimate grievance. The factory owner's deception was in service of theft. One masked the truth about injustice. The other hid the truth about profit. The real lesson isn't about machines or progress. It's about who gets to tell the story. When you control the printing press, you control history. When you control Parliament, you control justice. The Luddites understood that, so they tried to speak in the only language power respects, force and fear. It didn't work, but it wasn't irrational, it was desperate. Today, we call them Luddites when we mean people afraid of change. But the real Luddites weren't afraid of change. They were afraid of being erased, and that fear, as it turns out, was completely justified. Their names are forgotten. Their grievances are misunderstood. And their enemy, the factory owners who exploited the machinery to enrich themselves, they're celebrated as innovators. So the question isn't whether the Luddites were right to use deception. The question is, why did they have to? And the answer implicates everyone in power then and now. When legitimate grievances are ignored, when the system itself is rigged, deception becomes the only available tool. That's not a bug in the system, that's a feature. The Luddite Uprising wasn't a war against progress. It was a con game where the workers finally decided to play by the rules of the powerful. And it failed, not because their cause was unjust, but because the game was rigged from the start. Subscribe for weekly investigations into the deceptions that shaped history and the ones still shaping our world.